run down that set because we got a special guest sitting in the big chair. He's in the big guy's chair in front of the other microphone, and we're going to be talking to Mr. James Lomenzo in a moment. We got J-Lo, she's in the bathroom doing her makeup as usual. We started that set off with Jeff Buckley. We gave you a little story about him. Please pick up Jeff Buckley Grace, one of the greatest LPs ever recorded.
That was my 10-year-old Ozzy.
Ruben, that's going to bring us up to the next track and the next project with Zach again. Now Zach's split from Ozzy for a bit and together. It seemed like he was kind of getting heavily into the Allman Brothers kind of vibe there.
That's what we were doing. That was like our bowling game.
Yeah. You know, with the twink thing come from Dickie Betts. So tell me about kind of that morphine off Ozzy and how that whole new path started for you two cats.
Well, if you listen to No More Tears, there's all that kind of twangy double stop guitar, very country. And it's funny because at first I remember Ozzy wasn't completely convinced, but then after Mike Wagner started putting it together, it made a lot of sense. It really broadened the scope of that music. And so Zach and I used to just amp out on the old movies all the time, just listen to it. We were going through a whole phase. You know, back then they were coming on MTV and doing unplugged things and stuff, so they were still pretty vital even at that point in the late 80s, early 90s. So when we started the band, we just kind of took the jam stuff we were doing on the stage and put it together as songs that we were working on. And we started with one lineup, and then it amalgamated, and then got bigger, and then got some more keyboards, more guitars, less keyboards, and then it just ended up being a three-piece. So we got Brian Tichy, my personal favorite drummer of all time on the planet Surface, no offense to Jeff.
Tichy in the house.
Just went off and did that record in Seattle, man. And, that was, every song on that one was very much the way we just recorded the Souls on Lead and stuff. We were to studio, take roll, and we did 1 or 2 or 3 takes, and that's each song was within 3 takes. And usually it was the first one was the winner.
Nice. All right, people, that was DC4 with Triple X with our in-studio guest, Ron Robertson on guitar. Buddy, tell me a little bit now. So we were talking about Dio, and we were talking about kind of your early years, and we led up to the phone call from Wendy Dio. So now you got the gig and you're playing with them, and you guys are working on the album. Why don't you take it from there and kind of give our listeners a sense of kind of what the writing was and the recording and just the vibe of working with the master.
Yeah, the master, absolutely. Well, the way we would write would be, we'd all get into the room. We were opposite Sound City in Van Nuys for a while. That was the first room we were in, like a kind of cool big rehearsal room, you know. Vinny's drums were set up and everything, and a couple of stacks of Marshalls and Jimmy Baines, Ampegs, and Jimmy sitting on a chair, and it was just all so exciting. And we would decorate the rooms as well. Like on a day, if the writing wasn't happening, we would just get in the car and we'd go to a thrift store, and they'd pick up like lamps and you know, bits and pieces, and like spray paint them and just make it like home. So we had a real fun decorating our rehearsal rooms. And then the actual writing process, Ronnie would quite often start with asking his guitar player, in this case me, for riffs. And you'd play a riff and another riff and no, ooh, what's that? And then we would just jam out the riff, jam it over and over and over, and he might sing something to it at that point, or just listen and would record it, and then he would say, well, what about changing the riff like this, you know, or how about going here with it, or I know, he'd say a good place to start to write a song is a good introduction, he'd say. So how are we going to get into it? How's the introduction of the song going to go? And then so if we got a good riff, then he might take it home and come back the next day with some lyric and melody. And then from then on, once we had an idea like that, it would be he would just ask the players, you know, where do you think we could go from here? And then someone would say something, he might not like that idea, or he might come up with the direction it's to go in. So he sort of steered the whole ship and wrote the songs really using his band as, you know, like his, you know, like a painter's palette, if you like, you know, just.
So how was the vibe when you came with a riff and the next day he comes back and you're hearing Dio sing a melody line over your riff?
Right, well, I was just so young. I was like, oh, this is what life's about. All right, cool. Yeah.
No big deal.
No, I was lucky enough. I think when you're that age, you're kind of
oblivious.
Yeah, oblivious.
Naive,
I was just naive.
Ignorance is bliss. Innocence is better. Probably.
Definitely.